Rain streaked the frosted glass of a Brooklyn funeral parlor as a family gathered around a closed casket, certain that grief was the only thing being handled that night. They did not know that hours earlier, in a back room down the hall, a man in surgical gloves had worked over their loved one's body with the practiced hands of a surgeon and the appetite of a butcher, stripping bone from the legs, tendons from the joints, skin from the back, and packing the hollow limbs with cut lengths of PVC pipe so the body would still hold its shape beneath the suit. He sewed the incisions shut, straightened the collar, and sent the body back down the hallway, on schedule for the viewing. His name was Michael Mastromarino, and between 2001 and 2005 he did this to more than 1,000 bodies. He had not always been a grave robber. He was once a licensed oral and maxillofacial surgeon on Staten Island, with a wife, 2 sons, and a practice that afforded him a house with a pool. But an addiction to the painkiller Demerol unraveled him quietly at first, then completely. Colleagues noticed the missed appointments, the erratic hands. Eventually the state took his license, and the surgeon who once healed jaws for a living was left with nothing but medical training, a hunger for money, and no legal way to use either. So he built something new. In Fort Lee, New Jersey, he founded a company called Biomedical Tissue Services. On paper, it looked like any of the country's legitimate tissue banks. Firms that recover bone, skin, and tendon from consenting donors and turn them into the raw material of modern surgery. Dental implants, spinal grafts, replacement joints. That industry runs on 2 things: consent and honesty about the donor's health. Mastromarino had abandoned both. He assembled a network of funeral directors willing to look away for money, chief among them a Brooklyn embalmer named Joseph Nicelli. The arrangement was simple. BTS would pay around $1,000 per body, investigators later noted, and in return a funeral director would hand over a corpse before it was embalmed or cremated, a body a grieving family believed was resting untouched. In back rooms, including one behind a funeral home on Bath Avenue, Mastromarino and his crew worked fast, often finishing in under an hour. Bones, tendons, heart valves, skin, anything with resale value went into a cooler bound for medical suppliers. Then came the paperwork. Legitimate tissue banks require signed consent forms and a documented medical history, because that history is the only thing standing between a diseased donor and a living recipient. Mastromarino's operation forged both, inventing causes of death and ages that made cancer patients and the elderly look like clean, eligible young donors. That forgery was not a paperwork crime. It was a broken firewall. Tissue banks rely on donor screening, blood tests for HIV, hepatitis, and syphilis, alongside a documented history, to catch disease before it reaches another human body. When contaminated tissue is implanted into a patient, through a dental graft or a knee reconstruction, any pathogen inside, it gains direct access to living cells and blood, bypassing the skin's natural defenses entirely. Mastromarino had not invented a new way to hurt people. He had simply disabled the one system built to stop it, and roughly 10,000 patients across the country received tissue that had passed, unknowingly, through his hands. For 4 years, he held every card. The dead do not talk, and the living had no reason to look. Then, in October 2005, a tip reached the New York Daily News. The story broke. The FDA shut Biomedical Tissue Services down within weeks, and Brooklyn prosecutors opened an investigation that sent exhumation crews into cemeteries across 2 states. Grave by grave, they found the pattern repeating: bones hollowed out, limbs refilled with plastic piping. And then came a name that turned a local scandal into a national one. Alistair Cooke, the celebrated broadcaster, who had died at 95 after a long battle with bone cancer. His remains, cancer and all, had been harvested and sold as clean tissue. His daughter later said she was haunted by the news. The balance of power had shifted entirely. The man who once decided, alone and unwatched, whose bones were worth taking now sat at a defense table while prosecutors read out more than 100 counts: enterprise corruption, body stealing, illegal dissection, forgery. In 2008, facing overwhelming evidence, Mastromarino pleaded guilty. He turned to the families and tissue recipients in the courtroom and apologized. It did little to soften the room. One recipient, who had received dental implants from improperly screened tissue, told the court, "The disgust factor is enormous. I will never be the same because of his actions." He was sentenced to a term that could have run as long as 54 years and ordered to forfeit millions of dollars to his victims. Then came an ending no writer would need to invent. Behind bars, Mastromarino was diagnosed with cancer, first in his liver, then spreading into his bones and brain. The very disease he had spent years erasing from paperwork to make stolen bodies look clean was now unfolding inside his own skeleton, with no forger left to hide it. On July 7, 2013, he died in custody at 49, leaving behind a wife who later admitted she had missed the early warning signs and a son who no longer spoke to him. What makes the story endure isn't that Mastromarino was some singular monster. It's that he succeeded for 4 years by finding the ordinary gaps where trust went unchecked, grieving families too devastated to imagine anyone would touch their loved one, funeral directors willing to sell a small betrayal for $1,000, suppliers downstream who never asked hard enough where the tissue truly came from. None of those gaps were extraordinary on their own. Together, they built a machine that consumed over 1,000 bodies before anyone thought to look inside.